Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Worker Being Podcast. Today we have Patricia telling us about an article that she read. Do you want to give us like a quick summary of what the episode today is going to be about, Patricia?
Sure. It's about proactive work behavior. So basically doing something at work. So the employee that is doing proactive work behavior, they're trying to make things happen. They're making some changes, positive changes to processes, procedures, the way the work is done, to help the company improve internally, and how that affects well-being, and as well as how management style can impact well-being when people are doing this type of behavior. So it's maybe a little bit more complicated than some of the concepts we've talked about before, but the findings are super interesting, and basically talks about how if you're a blaming boss that doesn't let people make mistakes, you're really harming your employees.
I like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when people try to make changes in their work environment, and then how managers react to that and how it impacts well-being.
Yep.
Cool.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear more. But before we delve into the article, today is a special day because it is our
Yay.
2-year anniversary. It's our birthday. It's
our
our birthday. Yeah.
We're two.
We're
a whole
two. Wow. It's so exciting. We didn't,
Yeah.
we were texting about it earlier today, just so our listeners know. And I said to Patricia, like, we didn't even get ourselves a cake.
I know. I'm like, I might need to buy some cupcakes later.
I want presents. I want cake. I want candles. I want someone to sing to us. But it is really exciting because it's 2 years from the idea generation. So this is like, you know, when we first, it was just a little twinkle in our eye, like they say about babies. That's creepy, but
it is creepy. But it's less creepy when you say it in regards to something like worker being.
That's true.
Like, it could be a twinkle in your eye in a non-creepy way.
It could be a non-creepy twinkle. That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and in commemoration of our birth, we were looking through just some like stats for the podcast and like how far things have gone. We did a little walk down memory lane, and it is really cool, and we're so thankful to all of you that have been listening, because you know, we have, just from the time that we thought of this idea till now, we feel like just so lucky to have such awesome listeners and followers. And we certainly have a lot to learn, and we have a lot more to grow, but we're really proud of what we've been able to do so far. And we were just looking at some of the podcast stats, and we were really excited. We're in like 46. We have listeners from 46 states, right?
Yes, 46 states and 32 countries.
Yeah.
So, yay. We're so grateful for all of you from all over the world and all over the U.S. that are listening in. I mean, the majority of our listeners are from the U.S., but we do have a good sprinkling across 32 different countries.
Yeah.
So welcome. We love that you guys are listening in, and we'd love to hear from you, especially, folks maybe that are international, where we don't always touch on international issues. So please write in, because we want to hear your stories and what it's like in your country around some of these topics. So it is very exciting to see that wide range of listeners, especially because the podcast, I mean, Worker Being was discussed 2 years ago today, but the podcast didn't even launch until August. So I feel like there's been some really exciting growth, and I hope we can keep it going.
Yeah. So just thank you so much to every one of you that's listening right now, or that has been listening for a while. We just really appreciate your support. And obviously, without, people to read our posts or listen to the podcast or subscribe to our newsletter, any of that good stuff, we can't do any of the things that we like doing, which is, trying to spread the word about good science on workplace well-being. So we're just so happy to be able to do this, and it's because you all let us do it. So thanks so much, and continue to spread the word about it, because we would love to see our message get spread to all 50 states and all the countries. That would be really cool. But yeah, so that was really exciting news on today, our birthday.
birthday.
I like
How are
our
you
birthday
feeling on our
songs.
birthday?
I'm feeling good
overall?
on our birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt a little bit sleepy earlier, so I took a nap, which I don't usually take naps, but I
Me
did take a nap.
too.
Did you?
Yes,
a
I
nap
felt the same
day.
way.
Yeah,
I was
it
like,
was a
oh,
nap
I kind of
day.
feel tired for no reason, and I was like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do a little naparoo for. It
Yeah.
was like 20 minutes, and it was actually perfect because I got up and I was like, boom, ready to go again.
Ready to go. And yeah,
Mhm.
so and I have some work to do tonight. I have to edit revision for manuscript and stuff like that, and I just like wasn't feeling like my brain couldn't look at it. You know how sometimes that happens where you're like, my brain needs to look at something but it can't look at it.
Mhm.
Like I knew it wasn't going to be good if I looked at it, so I was like, I need a
Right.
little nap, and then I'll record the podcast, and then I'll hop back on it. I also drank coffee before I started talking to you too, so I have lots
Well,
of caffeine
coffee
in
is
the
good too.
caffeine in the system, and it's not great because it's like 8 p.m. here, but I also am like fairly immune to caffeine at this point, so I'll still be able to sleep tonight.
Yeah, you're also a late bird. You're not a
I am a
morning
late bird.
owl, so or wait,
I am
that's the other way
not.
around. Morning bird, a late whatever.
There's
Night
no morning
owl.
bird.
There's
Early
no
bird.
morning owl. Owls are
But there's
gone in the
also no
morning.
morning bird. There is a morning bird. There's no morning bird. There's an early bird.
Early bird and a night owl. I clearly don't know what I'm talking
You
about.
don't know.
Maybe the nap didn't do a good job.
You're foul. Your bird identification and the timing is way off.
Yes.
my God.
Not so good. That's
Um,
okay.
Yes,
We're not worker birds. We're worker bees, so we're good.
we know all about insects. The morning,
Actually, not at all. Don't ask me questions.
the morning ant and the night spider. I don't know.
Ew. Okay.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah, we're not doing that anymore.
I don't want to be a night spider.
No.
No.
Ew, too many legs.
Rejection of that idea.
Yep. Yeah, we're
Outward
done.
rejection.
That's not happening.
Yeah.
Not happening.
All bugs except for bees are disgraced from this podcast.
Oh goodness. Well.
But that's funny that we both took naps. How are you feeling in general? How was your day? What's going on with you?
Good. I'm feeling good. Yeah. I just I don't really know why. I mean, I think why I needed a nap. I think I just didn't sleep super well last night. Like I kind of woke up a few times and I don't know why. It was just
Oh.
a little bit of a meh night. And so I was feeling sleepy and after I got like all the major things I had to get done, I took a little naparoo so that I'd be ready for this conversation. And now I feel chipper and I feel like I can get more stuff done if I wanted to later, but I actually might take a good break because, well, The Bachelorette is on. So
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I have to prioritize that, obviously.
Yes. I mean, as you know, I have never viewed the show, but I know a lot of people that love it, and I understand wanting to take a break to watch your program of choice because I also have times where I wish to take a break to watch my program of choice, and most of my programs of choice have to do with food competitions.
You have a
But
lot
I
of
totally get
competition
it.
ones too.
Yeah.
Like dance. You do a lot of dance competition ones.
Yes, that is true. World of Dance, very true.
Mhm.
And I really like all the like food, like best baker and best this and like I get really into those kinds of shows, and I don't know what it is about the formula of like Food Network type shows, but like whatever that formula is, my brain likes it. So I also like that you can like kind of pay attention, but you don't have to pay full attention to it, because sometimes I'll try to do like a little work while I'm doing it, and then
Yeah.
I feel like minorly productive because it's not like it doesn't require like tons and tons of attention.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I like a lot of those garbage reality TV shows because of that too. It's like
Yeah.
I can watch it, but like sort of not
Right.
watch it, and you're not gonna like if you miss a couple minutes of like the Bachelorette talking to some random dude. I think it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like
You're not going to be like, oh
miss
no, now
anything major.
now I don't understand at all what happened. Like that's
Yeah,
never gonna-
or what's
like,
going
you're like,
on.
I'm so lost. This plot is so confusing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. So it's totally easy to multitask with a lot of those shows. And I agree. I feel
Yeah.
like I have a lot of those types of shows where I don't fully veg out. I like kind of do some other stuff on the side, but
Yeah.
I like those. I don't know.
Me too.
It works for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that anything that you can find sort of like relaxing in that way is it's all good. Whatever it is
Yeah.
that makes you happy and lets you be you.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
Well, let's talk about this article now
Okay.
because I think it's really cool and interesting, and hopefully you will feel the same way.
I'm sure I will.
Let me start with giving you the title and all that good stuff. So,
Yes.
the title is Does Daily Proactivity Affect Well-Being? The Moderating Role of Punitive Supervision. And it was published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior this year, 2019, by Cangiano, Park, and Yu. So, new article, new research.
Yeah.
It's not really an area that I know a ton about. So I'm excited to dive into it, and I'm excited to have read up on all of this. And I
Yes.
think you'll find it super interesting just because they just have some really interesting findings. And I kind of mentioned them a little bit already, but it's really showing that, doing these proactive behaviors, which I'll describe in a little bit, is really helpful to helping employees feel competent in their work and helping them have higher vitality or feeling more energized. But then if they have those punitive supervisors or supervisors that will, blame people and don't let people make mistakes or get away with mistakes in any positive way, then that actually has kind of the opposite effect. Then employees start to feel anxiety. And then because they have that anxiety, they don't detach from work at the end of the day. So they don't take those breaks at all at the end of the day. And they're constantly like worrying and ruminating on the work day. So it kind of has this negative effect. So then in that case, doing this proactive work behavior is actually not helping your well-being.
So I think that that's really interesting because there's a lot of conversation in organizations right now about, innovation and trying to change your workplace for the better and shaking things up and, making suggestions for improvement and employee voice and all this kind of, focus on getting feedback. So it's kind of interesting to think about, okay, but if you're in an environment that doesn't really support what happens in the aftermath of doing that, or that isn't open to the idea that, you might be able to make a suggestion, but maybe it doesn't end up being adopted or whatever the case may be, that, that's okay. The next time around, you might not feel comfortable or you might be ruminating over the fact that it didn't go so well. So could you talk a little bit about, just because I know that that's kind of a popular narrative in organizations, like, could you talk a little bit about what they mean by this constructive feedback? Because, for me, it sounds kind of similar to this kind of idea of changing your workplace for the better, making suggestions to kind of make things run more smoothly.
Yeah, so you're really on track as to what it means. So basically, they talk about it as being this behavior, or employees are engaging in making something happen in the workplace that's going to make a change for the positive within the company's environment. So within your team, within your specific job, within the broader company. So kind of going out of your way. This is outside of your job description and coming up with ways to improve. So the kinds of questions that you could ask someone to know if they're doing this proactive work behavior are things like, I came up with ideas to improve the way in which my core tasks are done. Or I initiated better ways of doing my core tasks. Or I generated creative ideas. So it's really about new ideas about something that's been going on for a while. And the things that they focus on specifically are that it has to be self-initiated. So like as an employee, I'm the one deciding to make this change. So no one's telling me to make the change. No one's saying, hey, will you take some time to think about a new way to do XYZ? I'm sitting here and I'm like, hey, I think we can do this better. And I'm self-initiating that. I'm choosing to make that decision to work on that update or project or whatever it looks like. It has to be change oriented. So it has to be something that an employee is trying to change for the better. So it's not just, I am now choosing to take on, to do this additional project for a client just because the client asked me to. So I'm going to do that and I'm going to, keep doing my job normally, but I'm actually changing something significant.
Mm-hmm.
and then future focused. So it's something that, will make improvements in the future. It's looking forward. It's not reacting. It's not like, oh, that didn't go well, so now I'm going to change the way I'm approaching it. It's, like this has been working fine, but I think we could be more efficient. So let's focus on doing it differently in the future. It's not in reaction to something that has
Gotcha.
happened. It's really focused on the future. So like I try to think of examples of this, and it could just be something as simple as like, we've been dealing with this a little bit at Infor. It's like we were looking at PowerPoints, and we've had the same way of presenting information to our clients for as long as I've been here, and probably before I was here.
Mm-hmm.
So at least 5 years, but definitely more. And
Yeah.
we spent some time thinking like one of my teammates, she's just like really good about PowerPoints, think about that stuff. She was like, you know what? Like, there's probably a better way for us to present this information than what we're doing today. And so she started changing the decks and, talking to people to make these presentations more interesting and more engaging and more modern. So she chose to do that. No one said, hey, we need to update these slides.
Right.
She was focusing on making a change that would, impact how work is done, but it's also future focused. It wasn't because it wasn't working. It's been working just fine, but she thought it could be better.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of times in faculty roles, that could happen with like updating curriculum for us. Like, maybe your courses are fine and the students aren't complaining about them and the classes are going well, but you realize that there's something happening in the marketplace that your courses are not reflecting. And so you might get together and say, okay, we need to revamp this class, or we need to create a new course that might cover some content that we haven't covered before to make sure that we're keeping up with what's going on in the external market. It's not necessary to do. You don't have to do it in order to, maintain student enrollments, but you think it would probably improve the program, the quality of the program, and what students get out of it after they're done. So, yeah, I think that that's a good example of, you're kind of improving something on your own because it would do something good for the company, but it's not like, oh, we got these really bad reviews on this, or our clients are complaining about our presentation, so we have to make a change, or I'm going to take on an extra client and put together a presentation that's similar to the ones that we've put together before, but I'm taking on extra work. It's like I'm going out of my way to make some kind of like instrumental positive change in the organization without being prompted to do so.
Exactly. Yep. And other research before this study really looked a lot at performance and how these kinds of proactive work behaviors help employees in terms of performance ratings. And so employees that are proactive and do these types of things generally have better performance ratings. They're more likely to be promoted, and they tend to have more successful careers. I don't really know how that was defined, but I'm assuming in kind of a standard approach to successful, like being promoted and continuing to grow within a company or something like that.
Right.
So basically, being proactive helps the employee in terms of success and promotion, and then it helps the company in terms of performance and doing better and, coming up with these new ideas that make things more efficient, and they're seen as higher performers. So there's a lot of incentive for companies to want employees to participate in this type of proactive work behavior or to do these types of things, because that will help improve their processes as well as, having higher performing employees. So lots of positives there. And this is the first study that really looked at well-being in regards to this behavior. So if I'm going out of my way to create these changes to improve my tasks or processes within the team or whatever that looks like, how does that impact me from a well-being perspective? Because companies are asking people to do this or want people to do this and rewarding them by giving them better performance ratings. What impact does it have from a well-being perspective?
Yeah. So it's like if my company expects that I'm going to be innovative or thinking of ways to improve, or if I know of a way that could improve a process, that I would call that to their attention and make those changes, that they expect that, or they would hope that people are doing that. But on one hand, you might think that you might get some positive boost because people recognize you for doing those things and you feel good about yourself and you feel happy that you made that suggestion. On the other hand, you might feel like you're working harder and longer, and if you're not getting recognition, or maybe you get negative feedback, or something goes wrong and you get in trouble or something like that, that it might have the opposite effect, that actually you might be putting in this extra time and energy and it would detract from your wellness, even though the sentiment is one that the organization wants to promote.
Exactly. Yeah. So what they found, I mean, is pretty much exactly that. So if an employee is being proactive at work, then they're more likely to feel competent, which makes sense, right? They feel like I can do my job, I am effective in my job, I'm able to follow through with these types of self-initiated projects or making these changes. Like there's a lot of talk in this article about how making these changes actually can be pretty hard. Like you have to convince people to change the way they're doing a process. You have to talk to leaders about whatever change you think makes sense, or any of those types of things. Like there's a lot of different steps to the process of making a change to improve the company. So being able to do that is challenging. And so if you're doing something challenging, then you're going to feel really competent and feel like you're doing something good and that you're capable, and that's great. And that leads to you feeling more vitality. So these people in the study, they felt more energized, they felt more alive, they felt a lot of vigor, like they were really excited, and it kind of helped them feel very energetic and being able to continue working. And after they leave work, they feel good too because they were able to accomplish something and feel really competent. So vitality is often used in measuring well-being, or a component of well-being, and that's what they looked at here is vitality. So that energizing feeling that you can get from work, and it really made a difference. These people being proactive really felt better and felt more energized than people that were less proactive.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So in general, it helps people to engage in these behaviors.
Exactly.
You mentioned there's like a caveat about how managers react, though. How does that come into play within this article?
Yes. So from a general perspective, it's really a good thing when people are proactive. So you don't see, they actually thought that there might be a negative side in and of itself, that like you had mentioned, being proactive at work might cause more work for yourself and make you feel stressed, etc. But that they didn't find that, unless you had a supervisor that was blaming people for mistakes. So basically supervisors that react negatively to employees' mistakes, maybe they yell at them, maybe they criticize them, maybe they punish them. The types of questions they asked to find out if a person was a blame-oriented supervisor or a punitive supervisor were, my supervisor gets angry or upset with staff if they make a mistake. My supervisor takes responsibility away from staff if they make a mistake. And my supervisor blames staff personally if things go wrong. So it's really about the leader, the supervisor, the manager blaming you if you do something wrong.
Yeah.
And they talk about this being kind of the opposite of psychological safety. So these people do not make it safe for employees to feel like they can, take a risk and try to change a process or try to change the way something's done. So generally being proactive and these proactive work behaviors do have some risk involved, because you don't know if it's actually going to make a difference. You don't know if people are going to accept it or want to make that change or whatever. And if you don't have a supervisor that will support you, if you have someone that's going to blame you if it goes wrong, then you don't have a lot of incentive to do it, first of all. And if you do it, you actually start to feel anxious.
Yeah.
So you feel anxiety that, oh my gosh, like, okay, I made this change, or I'm going to make this change, and now I start to feel anxious. And when I start to feel anxious, then when I get home, I keep thinking about it and I don't detach from work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting to relate this idea to wellness, because I know just broadly in conversations that I've heard people having in the, practitioner end of things, like clients that I've, worked with, or professional association events that I've gone to, where I've heard people talking about these kinds of things from an innovation perspective. I think that people often talk about how if you're not able to promote an environment that supports innovative ideas or change, then what ends up happening is, people see, oh, well, yeah, that person had a good idea and it worked and they got praised. But then the next time when they tried something and it didn't work, they got punished. So I'm not even going to try because I don't have to do this in order to do well in my job. This is like a nice to do, but not a needs to do. And if there's a negative outcome associated with it, then it makes it less likely that, the cost benefit analysis changes, right, in people's minds. Like, if it's not something necessary and there's a possibility it might be harmful to me, then I'm just not going to engage because the benefit doesn't outweigh the potential cost. But I feel like, a lot of companies that have been more innovative or on the cutting edge of innovation have sort of been thinking this way, but haven't really known why it works or how it works. And it certainly hasn't been linked to well-being outcomes for employees yet. So I think that that's really interesting. I actually heard the former, I think he was the COO of Pixar, talking about this, that they tried to create an environment where people could take risks, and as long as they were calculated risks that weren't like completely foolish, right? Like just something that you're trying but you haven't thought it through, or if you tried something and you haven't really thought it through, and then you learn from that mistake and don't repeat it. You know what I mean? Like, if as long as it's not just like somebody that continually is making errors, because that's a different thing, that they really worked on like innovation management from that perspective of trying to, even when things failed, trying to recap like, okay, well, what was the learning, and like thanking people for trying to take the risk. And they had an award for like best failed idea. Yeah. So like they were talking about how they were doing that, but I think that they knew that it was important for productivity, but I don't think that they were thinking about it from a wellness perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really cool that this aligns though. And I feel like it's a similar story that we hear over and over again, right? The happy, productive worker, happy, productive worker. Yeah. And I feel like we see it time and time again that employees that are happy or feeling good in some way, they tend to be more productive. And we're seeing that in a different way in this study, but it's a similar idea, right? If you're being creative and trying to come up with new ideas and trying to make improvements, you tend to feel better. So it's almost like in this case, they're seeing that being productive in a way, right? Because you're doing these proactive behaviors leads to some well-being. So there's kind of the relationship goes both ways. And I think it's really critical that people have that space and that safety to make a mistake. And I think this study really highlights that with those supervisors that would blame people for mistakes versus embracing that. And like you said, come up with learnings, figure out what they're going to do next. How do they improve versus focusing it on the negative of the mistake. And I agree. Like, it doesn't matter that the mistake is like something that's thought through and they're trying something new versus just like, today I am randomly going to not have a PowerPoint when I go to my client meeting for no good reason. Right. But if you want to promote these kinds of behaviors, you have to be accepting of the fact that they're not always going to be the best.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And make people not afraid to try something, because if they're afraid to try, then it's like the point of having that environment, or the message that you're giving, like, oh, we want you to think outside the box and try new stuff. Well, it doesn't really resonate with people if they know that if whatever their new stuff is that they try doesn't work, that they're going to be in trouble or they're going to get yelled at. It's like, well, you don't really mean it, right? So like allowing for experimentation means that you have to honor the whole part of the process, which means that you have to try things and be willing to accept that not every idea someone has is going to work. But, even if, as long as they're not like catastrophically bad or again, like not well thought out, that, if every fifth idea someone has works, then you've got 5 times the improvements that you would have had if none of those ideas came to the fore at all.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Too, about the negative side, so the anxiety piece, like if you have a supervisor that will get mad at mistakes, you don't even have to have made a mistake yet to feel anxiety. Yeah, you don't even have to have made a mistake to not be able to like relax when you get home, and that is pretty intense, I think. So it's like, here we are, like if you were able to create this safe environment, people feel more energized and vigorous and alive, and they're excited and they feel competent, and it's awesome. Even if they make a mistake, like it doesn't matter, because they're doing this and being proactive. But then they might be doing some sort of proactive behavior, might be coming up with some new idea, and maybe it's going to turn out great. But because they know their supervisor gets mad about these mistakes, that anxiety is still going to increase, and they're still going to have a hard time detaching. So it's not, the mistake piece is important because that's the kind of culture you need to have to let people create and be proactive. But it's not even whether or not you make a mistake or not. Like, that has nothing to do with how you feel and how this impacts your well-being. So it's just knowing what environment you're in. So if you are in a bad environment, if you're in an environment where you will be blamed for a mistake, you're going to feel anxious, and that's terrible. Like that, you could have a perfect idea that ends up working out really well, and instead of walking away from that feeling great, you still might have some residuals from the anxiety that you felt leading up to figuring out if it's going to work or not.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense too, because there's so much work on the impact of rumination when you're at home, what the impact of thinking about your job while you're off the job does for your well-being. And when you are ruminating over things that are stressful for you, it does tend to have a negative impact on your work the next day. It has a negative impact on your job attitudes, because it's like you're, constantly processing negative job information. And we all do it, right? Like this isn't some like thing that lives in a study but not in reality for people. Like, I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people listening. Like when you leave work, it's not like you leave all your thoughts about work there. You keep thinking about different things that people said or did. And if you're really worried about how people are perceiving you or what people think about you at work, and then you bring that home, or you're worried that you're going to get in trouble for something, or you're worried that, you're going to set somebody off, or, it just creates an environment where people are really paranoid around each other. And that's not an environment where people are able to really make positive strides, because it's not comfortable or favorable for anyone.
Right. Yeah, it kind of breeds this continuous anxiety over and over again. So I think that the main things to take away from this study are that, if you have a good work environment, if you have some flexibility to take a risk, and that's okay if you make a mistake, or if the risk doesn't fully pan out every time, then the takeaway is that you should do those types of things. As an employee, you should take some time to focus on, how can I improve what's going on in my workplace? How can I improve our processes so that you can reap the benefits of feeling competent, feeling that vigor and energized. I can't say the word. Energized emotions, whatever. Energy. That's the word.
There it is.
Feeling energy. So like, as an employee, that's something you should think about, because there is evidence here that that's going to help you feel better every day. And then, but if you're in a place where maybe you don't have that safety, maybe you don't have the ability to make a mistake, then it's probably better just to not even bother. Like, honestly, just don't bother. Like, you think you have a good idea, but you might get flack if it doesn't work out well, then just don't bother with it. It's not worth your well-being. It's not worth being anxious nonstop. And with that, obviously, managers and leaders should really focus on creating that environment, that space where people can be proactive and can make mistakes if they are going to, be able to take some risks and not feel like they're going to get blamed or punished, or, have responsibilities taken away from them because of a mistake or any of that. So managers and leaders should really focus on creating a good environment where people can be proactive, because you will get a lot of benefit as an organization if you have an environment where people can make these changes and improvements, and, thinking, like you said, thinking outside of the box, and kind of getting out of their comfort zone and doing things outside of what's in their job description to help move the company forward in a really positive way. So companies should really focus on making that culture.
Yeah, and I think just even listening to you talking about that, like, how horrible is it to be, a leader or manager in a company and think that your employees might feel like, oh, well, I have these good ideas, but what's the point, right? It's worse for me to try to share it. So if you think, or you take a look at the mirror and you feel like that might be the case, that might be how people feel, they feel afraid to take risks, then maybe you need to think about how to change that or to make that different. I know in the instance of the Pixar person that he was talking about how I think I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but like when they were making Toy Story 2 or 3, I think they almost lost the entire movie when it was like 95% done.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so somebody who was in charge of creating the backup system for all their servers didn't realize that there was like a glitch in their plan. And
oh my gosh.
one of the servers got completely deleted. And so what they did was they made it so that a change on one server got backed up to another server, got backed up to another server. So it was in 3 different places. And the idea was like, well, if one of them would like explode or something would happen, we still have it in 2 other places. But what they didn't account for was that if the entire movie got deleted somehow, it got deleted from one, deleted from another, deleted from another. And so somehow it got fully deleted from one of the servers, and then it backed up to the other 2 as deleted. And they basically came in the next morning, everybody who had been working on this movie for years, and came to basically the conclusion that the movie is gone. And
oh my gosh.
the guy
So
that was
scary.
in charge of setting up the backup system was 100% positive he was going to lose his job. I mean, that was like, he came into work that day being like, yep, I'm packing up my stuff. Like, obviously I'm gone. And the CEO asked around about how many people like okayed this system. How long did you spend talking about it? And it was clear that like a lot of really smart people sat around and talked about it, and it got through many levels, and it was a lot of time and energy went into creating the system. And like, it was just a mistake that no one thought about that possibility. And so he was like, you know what? Like, this is a good employee. They did their best. A lot of people overlooked this mistake. It was an honest mistake. So he started the meeting off about the fact that they had lost the whole movie by saying no one is getting fired.
Oh, wow.
And everybody in the room was like relieved. And it was like, okay, well, even if you make a really terrible mistake, as long as you were trying your best to make a good decision and you were trying your best to create a good system, and, you know, you went through the processes, you know, necessary to get things approved and whatever, then like, you're not going to just automatically get axed for a mistake. And he was talking about how that like really changed the feeling there as soon as they heard that no one was going to get fired. And the funny thing is that what ended up happening was that a woman who had gone on maternity leave, who was one of the primary animators, had asked the week before if there was any way that she could get a copy of the movie made for her so that she could work on it from home. And someone had approved that, made a copy of it, and like put it on some secure server that was in her house. And so she was the only one. Yes. So she had the only, they like called her and they were like, do not touch anything. Don't, like, you're the only person in the world that has a copy of this movie right now. So they ended up losing like a couple or like a week's worth of work or something on it, but that was it. So it ended up getting recovered. But
that's so lucky.
Yeah. In any event, it was just an interesting story from that perspective that they created that safe environment for people to feel like, okay, well, you know, it wasn't the greatest showing, but nobody's going home. You know, we're all kind of in it together.
Well, I think that also, so not only does that promote the idea of, hey, you can make a mistake as long as you're working really hard and you're trying to do something better, right? You're trying to make improvements. You're trying to do your job well. It's okay if you don't always succeed. Like, people are people, we make mistakes. But not only does it do that, but I think in this specific situation, you are now opening up everybody to think more freely and think more positively to come up with a solution. So like, yes, in this case, probably someone was like, hey, so-and-so has it on their drive, I just remembered, or whatever that looked like. But it could have been a very different situation. It could be like, okay, well, how can we, you know, what other options do we have? And now that everyone's kind of had that weight lifted, I'm sure it allowed them to be more constructive and productive in their approach to the solution than they would have been if they were, you know, focusing on the fact that Joe got fired and, you know, so-and-so is in trouble and like all these negative things. Because I that would have made, obviously, that meeting very depressing and dark.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And it would have probably not been nearly as productive as it could be. So I think that there's something there, too. It's not just supporting the mistake and letting people have that space, but it's also letting people pick themselves back up and move forward and having negative consequences, like extreme negative consequences, would not have allowed them to move forward as positively as they probably did.
Yeah, totally. I agree. So is there anything else that you think employees or managers should know about supporting an environment where people can make these positive changes?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything that I really wanted to touch on. I mean, it really just comes down to managers and leadership and organizations as a whole being able to make space for people when they make mistakes, being able to give people the room and the flexibility to be proactive, right? So not just making the space to let them make mistakes, but also allowing them the flexibility to make changes and to take control of processes and procedures that they're involved in. So, if I'm working at a coffee shop and the way we make, the way we do our latte process, right? It goes to this person, then this person, this person. Then I decide, well, actually, it'd be faster if one person just does it all. I should be able to be given the room to think about it and make that suggestion. So there's the support side of not blaming someone for mistakes, but also the support and the room to let people be creative and let people have some agency and some control over their own tasks and work environment that helps people get into this proactive space. So I think from a leadership perspective, there's a lot that you can do. And then I think from an employee perspective, like weigh the risks. If you're in a positive environment where you have that room, then go for it. Start being creative and thinking of ways to make improvements.
Yeah. Or if you have a supervisor who you think might be open-minded to thinking differently but hasn't really considered it before, maybe think about using this article or this podcast to help them to understand why they might want to think about things a little differently.
Exactly. Yeah. Have those conversations. You can always ask your leader, right? So maybe you're saying, hey, I've been thinking about some processes that I want to improve, and maybe you think your manager or supervisor will be open to that. Then maybe that's the first time you're proactive. You actually just have a conversation before you start making any changes and diving right in. And I think that's totally okay. And seeing if you can get people on board with this approach to letting people kind of have some autonomy to make these types of changes. Yeah,
definitely. I agree. Well, thank you so much for reading this article. It was really interesting. I've never heard of anything like this before. So I'm happy that we got a chance to talk about this brand new research.
Thanks. Yeah, I found it really exciting and interesting, and I'm glad we're able to discuss it too. And we'd love to hear from all of you if you have any feedback, or if you've been in a situation where maybe you've had a bad supervisor and you couldn't make changes, or maybe if you're in a great situation and how that's panned out from you. We'd love to hear your stories, both in the U.S. and internationally. So please reach out. You can find us at workrbeeing.com. You can email us at workrbeeing@gmail.com, or send us a note on social media on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at workrbeeing. Thanks for listening. Bye. The Worker Beeing podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabarek
and Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.